Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, that food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. Heads up, as you probably have heard or read, after this week's program, Ruckus will be away until Thursday, August the 21st. That means we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, so let's get started. I'm Mike Shannon, and here are the Ruckettes. Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abu-Haka, Gwen Grant, president and CEO of the Kansas City Urban League, media and communications consultant, no, that's not media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran. Mary is delayed because of a traffic mishap, and we hope she'll be able to join us before the end of the program. Now, returning from a lengthy vacation in Jefferson City, lobbyist Woody Cozad with the Cozad Company. And to make Woody comfortable, we'll start in Missouri State Capitol, where the legislative session has come to an end. The Kansas City Star headlined the session as a GOP success story, citing tax cuts, abortions, restrictions, movement on... I'm sorry, that's not working. Can we... I hate to start over again, but I thought you were going to go to Mary, and that just... Yeah, I was going to say, introduce Mary and say, because of a traffic mishap, she's been delayed, and sorry.
Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. Let me give you a heads up, as you probably have heard or read. After this week's program, Ruckus will be away until Thursday, August the 21st. Now that means we've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, so let's get started. I'm Mike Shannon, here are the Ruckettes. Kansas City Star editorial writer Yael Abu-Haka, Gwen Grant, president and CEO of the Kansas City Urban League, media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran. Mary, by the way, has been delayed because of a traffic mishap, and we hope she'll be able to join us before the end of the program. And finally, returning from a lengthy vacation in Jeff City, lobbyist Woody Cozad with the Cozad Company. To make Woody comfortable, we'll start in Missouri State Capitol, where the legislative session has come to an end. The Kansas City Star headlined the session as a GOP success story, citing tax cuts, abortion restrictions, movement on school transfers, and holding off Medicaid expansion. We've already seen the legislature override Governor Jay Nixon's veto of income tax cuts. So, Woody, are there some other vetoes ahead that are likely?
Well, your guess is as good as mine. I'm pretty sure that...
I doubt that.
No, it is. I'll tell you, I worked on a couple of bills with the Democratic minority extensively this session, and they are, if anything, more mystified and frustrated by the governor than the Republicans are. And if you ask them what he's going to do on anything, they'll just roll their eyes and shrug. Nobody can figure out the theme of the second Nixon administration or what it is. And so really, if he's got a personal astrologer, ask them that question. I don't know what he'll veto. if I had to guess, I think he may veto the transfer bill.
The school
transfer bill. But there's just hardly anything in it that ought to cause that. I mean, they talk about kids going to private schools and public dollars going to private schools. First of all the accredited schools in your district have to be full before you can do that. Secondly, if you do it, it has to be in your district. How many secular, it has to be secular, private schools are there in the Kansas City School District? There are none in Normandy and Riverview.
Well, and Normandy went to court today, I believe, suggesting that the state law, the new state law, is unconstitutional. So that's up for grabs.
I don't understand this opposition when in reality there's nothing there that's going to happen.
Well, what about the abortion bill? Let me ask you that before we get on to the other people. Wouldn't he be likely to veto an abortion bill that has a 72-hour waiting period?
He'll veto it, and I don't know whether they have the votes for an override, because due to people taking other offices and positions, you don't have veto-proof Republican Party majorities in these two houses anymore.
When?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the transfer bill. I think a problem with that, and I think the governor should veto the bill. I think the bill is flawed, and there are some aspects of it that I think are good, but they didn't address the transportation issue. They left too many things hanging in the air. So basically, if a student is able to transfer, the district the unaccredited district gets to decide whether they pay transportation or not. That should have been handled in that bill, and the governor should.
It was last year's bill, and they complained because it was handled. So we took it out this year, and now they complain that it isn't in there. Take your pick. You can't win.
Yale, there were some GOP failures in this session of the legislature. They didn't get everything they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, the big one, or one of the big ones, would be the whole gun nullification thing. I mean, most of the conservative states were able to do it. Missouri failed. I think it's an unbelievable failure by the GOP leaders.
Explain what it is they wanted. They wanted to nullify some federal laws regarding weapons.
And make sure that if you ever work for the federal government, you'll ever be able to work for the state government or another local law enforcement. Like, why would you ever want to do that anyway? But I wanted to go back to, just real quickly, your question, which was, is it a GOP success story? And I would agree in general that it was. They got the tax breaks they wanted, although Jeff Rowe told us last week that the tax breaks are nothing. It's a sham, that they're not really going to get any money. So I guess that's not really a hollow victory, because it's not really going to cost state money, because it's never really going to kick in. And then you have the abortion thing, which you mentioned, and Nixon actually has allowed these things to go into before. That's a Republican Nixon trying to get along with the anti-abortion people. Now this one, the one that steps out to him, he's mentioned a couple of times, is the rape and incest. There's no, these GOP maniacs are so unbelievable on the abortion issue that they would pass something like that. And I do hope he vetoes that bill just because of that.
Woody, let me ask you a process question. If Nixon vetoes any of these bills or others, the legislature is not in session. What happens for the Republicans? They're called back into session, or they have a veto session later in the year?
You can have a special session.
Right. But the governor would need to call that, would he not?
The governor would need to call that, although a sufficient number of the members can call themselves into special session. I don't think that's going to happen. You have a regular veto session in September.
Yeah.
So normally that's the way to handle it. Now, the transfer bill might cause a special session. I could see him call on a special session to deal with the problem with transfers if he vetoes the bill. But otherwise, I don't think there'd be a special session.
You're glad to be back in the Kansas City area?
I'm glad to be back, and maybe when I say there won't be a special session, that's just wishful
thinking. Yeah. All right, a couple of transportation issues are ballot bound, and both are in Missouri. Kansas City voters will decide whether to expand the downtown streetcar starter system to the east and south. Only those in the targeted geographic areas will vote on the property and sales tax increases. In November, the entire state will vote on what is described as the biggest tax increase in Missouri history. If okayed, it would increase the state's sales tax by 3/4 cent and generate about $500 million annually for roads and transportation projects. The tax would take effect next year and end a decade later. So what about the chances of success for both of these? Gwen, let's start with the local story, the streetcar starter system expansion.
The starter system expansion, which is would be a 1 cent sales tax increase. I think it has an uphill battle. I think that you know, first off, they have to, in August, you have to get the voters to approve the district. Then you have to come back in the November election and get them to approve the tax. Certainly, if I were opposed to the tax, I certainly would not vote to approve the district. That's a critical step there, and I think that's what creates an uphill battle for that tax. It's a 1 cent sales tax. It's a regressive tax. So to get folks all excited about that, just for this expansion, which may have some positive benefit, but those people who live in that district also will have to bear the burden of a real estate tax. So they're going to pay increased real estate tax plus increased sales tax. I think that's a hard sell for the city to make, and I just think it's going to be an uphill battle.
But didn't the mayor say it would generate economic development and pointed to all the projects in the downtown area that have already begun as a result of the streetcar starter line?
Yeah, yes, he did. But these lines are going different places. They're going down Independence Avenue, they're going down Linwood Boulevard, and they'll be going down Main Street. All three have economic development potential. All have the potential to, you know, maybe attract residents there. So I'm going to hit the pro points real quickly. So those are two economic development ideas that streetcar in 3 to 5 to 8 years might really propel to happen after it gets built, which actually won't start till 2019 supposedly. Another proponent thing is, you know, as Gwen said, it's a 1 cent sales tax. It is regressive. But I've been written for 25 years here. We love sales taxes. They more likely get approved, certainly more than property taxes do, although this one also has a property assessment on people who live next to the line. And then the other pro is that you have a very passionate base of young and some older people who are for this, who are saying, we've got to try this. Let's rebuild the grid of Kansas City. I mean, I think that's an argument. Whether it's a winning argument, I don't know. My final negative point is, I basically agree with Gwen. I think it's an uphill battle. They have to do it in August. You don't win in August, obviously it's over. But I think if you win in August, that really sets you up for November.
Well, Woody, if the vote in August is negative, is that the end of it, or will they come back at some point in the future and try again?
They'll come back.
I mean, this is something the mayor really wants.
Mayor's really behind this idea. Look, I think the big question is November, because you're going to have a 3/4 cent sales tax on there statewide.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're going to look down, there's going to be this local sales tax plus a property tax.
Yep.
It's going to begin to register on people quite a bit.
Yep.
So even if you get the TDD done in August and officially formed, that is no guarantee when I get to the ballot and I go down there and I see all that, that I'm going to vote yes on.
TDD, Transportation Development District, right?
Right.
Woody, it's not a guarantee that November would be a win, but I do think August is the big time. And you also have to remember that one of the things that's really important here is that you have the state going for this tax that you mentioned before. And I talk about uphill battle. I really think that's a big battle.
Your column today deals with sales tax increases and tax increases throughout the decades.
But that seems to be, we just seem to be sales tax crazy. You know, like I haven't taken a position against the streetcar, but the concern is we just want to use the sales tax to pay for everything, and we need to start thinking about some other ways.
Do you feel that way about the state tax, said to be the biggest tax increase in state history for transportation?
For what? And for what?
Well, I mean, for what, Woody? What would that be for?
Well, for the highway system that tomorrow morning will carry 90% of the cars that travel in the city during the rush hour.
But do
That's what it's for.
But do
and for
I-70,
what's the problem with it, Woody? What is the problem?
Tax the gasoline.
Tax the gasoline.
Instead of the sales tax.
Instead of the sales tax. Okay, well, gee, because we are attempting to reduce the number of gallons you use in your car.
Right, that's fine. That's fine.
While the number of miles
we have the lowest gasoline tax almost in the nation.
People are more willing to pass the sales tax than a fuel tax.
Speaking of cars, we welcome Mary O'Halloran to the program. I understand you were in a traffic mishap of some sort.
I was in a mishap of some sort.
And you're all right now?
I think everything that it has to work is. Not so sure about the dizzy.
Are you dizzy?
Yeah, I know.
Never stopped it before.
Woody's back after 2 months and he's doctoring already.
Okay.
It's wonderful.
We'll move on. Sometimes numbers tell a story better than anecdotes or philosophical musings. A Star editorial about homicides in Kansas City, Missouri is a prime example. The Star studied police data from 2009 through last week involving 572 homicides. 84% of the homicides were committed with guns, 5% by stabbing, 82% of the victims were male, 75% were black. 75% of the known suspects were black. The city's black population in 2010 was 30%. There's much more to the editorial, but the conclusion is this: Kansas City still has a murder problem. It's concentrated in certain parts of the city, and it involves a relatively small part of the population. The Star suggests some progress is being made, but Mary, do you agree?
Well, I think for the first time on this show, more than agree. I think this is the most creative, most best planned, most hopeful, direct assault on homicides and violent crime in the core city of Kansas City that I've ever seen. And I've worked with a lot of people over the years. I was on the Human Relations Commission and others, and full of people with good intentions and good ideas. But to bring together the police department, the county prosecutor, the U.S. attorney, the ATF, the FBI.
A lot of organizations.
Yes, and many of them all have now their offices together. And then they're putting on these extraordinarily creative events like call-in. Okay, all the parole officers say is certain kind of people have to be there and other kind of people. And then social workers get working and they take a look at mothers, sisters, aunts, maybe someone who's been the victim of some mild crime of a person before, and get them all in the same room. And they hear from Mayor Sly James, who is very supportive and very deeply involved. And you have to say that it's evidence-based. They're not trying to go out and preach and do all kinds of things. It's here's what your options are. You have a chance to turn your life back. And guess what? They've got some numbers going on homicide that it's 19 as we speak, and it was 27. On the average
27,
31.
Yale says. You wrote this editorial, yeah. I suspect. Did anything in it surprise you? It says there's a lot of black-on-black crime.
Yeah, I mean, that was true. There are anomalies, like little outliers, like the number of white victims doubled from 10 to 20, for example, 10 to 20% in a 2-year period at one point. But most of the numbers were pretty much in line with what you'd think, although that's one of the reasons we did it, because you hear that, oh, well, 100% of it's committed by blacks, or 100% is committed in the inner city. Well, no to both. And so you obviously have to be concerned about that, or at least know about that. I would say that, it's kind of as Mary said, there's a concentrated effort with the Kansas City No Violence Alliance program, the NOVA program that she mentioned. It does seem to be having some effect. I did do some figuring out that at the current rate, which is around 5.5 to 6 murders a month, if we end up around 60 to 70 murders, that's far less than 109 average. That's still much worse than most cities. I mean, we still have a long way to go. The progress is good. Yeah. We still have a long way to go to catch a lot of other cities that have lower murder rates.
When we used to work on this on the commission, every time we went to a meeting, the same words would come up. Nobody trusts us. Nobody trusts the police. Nobody wants to trust another organization they've never heard of. And this is the first time I've ever seen all the major organizations present and counted for. And it's not, look, come together in a room and we're going to help you and find you a job. It's, look, come together in a room and you want to participate in society, feel free. You have to be lawful, in other words, for quite some time before you get benefits that will be substantial to these people.
And the Star is calling for tighter gun laws in Missouri, but Woody, I don't think that's likely to happen. So is that really something that even needs to be considered? And I wanted to mention one of the stories said murders caused by guns. Well, murders aren't caused by guns, are they? They're caused by people firing them.
Oh, come on, Mike.
Well, isn't that true?
Mike, yeah.
That's
but
reasonable.
we need. I'm never going to stop saying we need greater, more gun control. I think that's really important. I mean, if you take.
Would that reduce the homicide rate in Kansas City?
I think
some
there
sort of
might
gun
be
control?
some impact on that, absolutely. If I don't have a weapon at my disposal when I'm caught up in a situation, then I would not possibly be able to take a life, you know, so I think it could have some impact. And I think that we don't need to abandon that by saying, yeah, guns don't kill people, people with guns kill people. Well, obviously.
But it just happens to be true.
But in other countries where guns are not as free, the murder rate is not nearly as high as the murder rate in our country.
We're going to have to wrap this up, Woody.
I would say one thing that Mary mentioned, evidence-based. In Richmond, Virginia in the 90s, they had a horrible murder rate, and they began locking up felons caught in possession of firearms, which is illegal. A felon's not supposed to have a firearm. And they began strictly enforcing the federal law, a 5-year sentence, and the murder rate plummeted. So I commend to the Jackson County prosecutor, and particularly to the U.S. attorney, that the same thing be done here. You want gun laws, we've got a gun law, and they don't enforce it very much.
And one other quick thing, the Star editorial said the city council should take more interest in what's going on with homicides in the police department.
Yeah, I mean, that's
explain that just
well,
real
because
quickly.
that's based on the public safety committee meetings that we watched all of last year, and they're doing a little bit better job this year. But it was just like, well, you know, let's talk about cab fares and all these other topics when murder rates and trying to get some of the you know, find out more about NOVA, find out more about some of these other Aim for Peace, the efforts to reduce violence.
Yeah,
they need, the city council need to know more
Okay.
about that
All
because
right.
they're the ones who spend the money on it.
Mary, we
Every
have got to move on.
There you go.
To be a millennial is to be coveted as a consumer by media, as a customer by business, and as a resident by cities. Kansas City is one of many metro areas trying to attract young adults in their 20s and 30s. To do so, Yale notes in a recent column, area leadership will have to recognize those significant generational differences in style and preference between millennials and their elders in such areas as transportation and technology. The conflict came to light as we discussed last week in the Uber and Lyft controversy. And someday, perhaps Kansas City will be a millennial magnet, but Yale, it appears that day has not yet arrived.
No, it hasn't. Again, okay, I'll start with the positives, which is, you know, we were like 14th on this list of gaining millennial people on the survey that a Brookings Institute guy does. But actually, over the last 3 years, we've gained fewer people than we did the 3 years before that under the Mark Funkhauser administration, I guess, to a degree. So the gains are not substantial. It's not like we're Austin or whatever in gaining a lot of millennials. Now, that's a little bit of a negative. The positive, obviously, is we really are trying. I mean, the streetcar is an example. The downtown, a revitalized downtown is an example. We have passionate leadership among some of the young people that I correspond with on Twitter and call me, and I try to reach out to them. Now, one of their big things, and this is, it drives me crazy sometimes, and other times, of course, I understand it as an editorial writer, which is, we can't do things the old-fashioned way, which is where the Uber Lyft thing comes in. And I think that, you know, I wrote the column last week, and then we had a front-page story on the little rift between the mayor and the mayor and the Lyft people, and it really is a seismic shift. Why are we paying all these people down at City Hall to, you know, throw barriers in front of businesses? Is one example. And then the other idea is, well, let's make sure that we do appeal to not just millennials, but to a group that wants to change things faster. And that includes people like me, an editorial writer. I'm, you know, 58 years old. I want to change things faster for good reasons.
Yeah, you ought to take them back historically to when there wasn't much regulation.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the regulation exists for a reason.
Because people who are regulated actually like it if it's done
with
a soft hand. Because it
keeps guys like Uber and Lyft out of
it. They want to go back to the old days. There wasn't anything, you know.
Well, it's now in federal court, this whole question of
I think so. It's a good
Uber.
place for it, I think.
Do you know millennials? What are they like? How are they different? How are they different? How are they different from the rest of us?
Hello, little millennials. How are you doing?
Well, obviously they're younger, but no, they do a lot of they get a lot of their information through technology, through, you know, social media.
So do all of us.
Yeah, but they're just a more, I think, more progressive in their thinking about things. It's right. Like, why can't we do this faster? Why can't this, you know, be more convenient? They're more likely to take advantage of Lyft or Uber, whatever it is. They're more likely to do that because they're not as concerned about all of those regulations and safety issues as maybe they should be. But you know, I think It's a refreshing group of young people. Young professionals that I know are really bright, talented young folks. They just have a much more.
We just have a few seconds, Woody.
Outlook on life.
Haven't there always been generational differences?
Sure.
When you and I were growing up, we disagreed with our elders.
One of the things that has made this country what it is that we have been more adaptable to those changes than some other societies. And that's a fine idea. I do want to, but I'll take the curmudgeon position here for a minute.
Do you have a choice?
Part of this, no, I don't. Somebody has to be realistic. And so, look, this is not a path to victory. It's in part an admission of defeat. What you want are families with kids. And what the cities are saying is we can't get them. The place is unlivable. Schools don't function. The families with kids aren't going to be here. So then you go after retired people and folks in their 20s and 30s who don't yet have school-age children. And so it's a second best option. The hard work is in making this place attractive to people who do have kids.
And the wealth of the nation is still in the hands of the baby boomer generation. Mary, we got to move on. It is time now for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes tell it like it is, or the way they like to think it is. And we'll start with Mary.
Good. Well, guess who I want to toast this week? Since it will be quite some time, apparently, before we're able to chat about what's going on in Kansas politically, thought I would toast Governor Brownback because of the ads he's running in Kansas
toast
right
him?
now. Roast him, rather.
Roast!
I could toast his opponents easily or roast him. You know, he's responsible for the health of the state. And the man simply would not allow the discussion of 78,000 people in Medicaid. That wouldn't allow talking about it. Never was asked, actually, by the media up front and personal. He claims the state is going to have a $50 million surplus as the results of his agenda. Guess what? It's a $1.5 billion deficit. He brags about 4.8% unemployment. Guess what? That's the average unemployment Kansas has always had. He says that Kansans are coming here in droves. The census shows people are leaving.
Mary, we got to wrap it up, or we're going to run out of time for everybody.
The biggest lie in this claim is that when he took office, he had $876 in the bank. It was actually $200 million.
Gwen.
He needs to start to tell the truth.
I'm roasting General Shinseki and the Veterans Administration for the horrible manner in which you have administered over Veterans Affairs and the poor manner in which most of the VA hospitals have served veterans who have stepped up to protect this country, have given their lives and sacrifice for this nation, to come home and not be able to take advantage of all of the benefits that they deserve.
This is a toast to Senator Jolie Justice, Representative Chris Kelly, both Democrats, Representative Stan Cox, Senator Bob Dixon, both Republicans, for the overhaul of the Missouri Criminal Code, the first overhaul of the code since it was enacted, over the obstructionism of the governor. They got it done anyway. This has been an 8-year project with the prosecutors, defense lawyers, and it was long overdue, and we got it voted through this year, and congratulations to them for working in a bipartisan manner to get it done.
Okay, very short toast to Kansas City voters, because we won't be able to try to influence you until before the August elections. Pay attention to the Kansas City fire sales tax renewal and what it's going to be for. Pay attention, please, to the streetcar tax. Both are very important issues. Whether they're going to pass, I don't know, but I think they're very much worth attention for the future of the city.
Finally, a toast to former mayor and physician Dr. Charles Wheeler, whose sharp wit is still intact. Saw him at a restaurant recently and said, "Dr. Wheeler, you're looking well." He then looked at me, head to foot, said, "You're looking well yourself. Now I can send you a bill." Kind of funny, isn't it? And that's Ruckus for now. We'll be gone for a while, but not for long. We return on August 21st with a new set, maybe a new feature or two, and of course, those familiar food for thought fights over the news of the day and the trends of the times. Now for Mary, Yale, Gwen, and Woody, this is Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.